Welcome, everyone, to vpod.ai. I am your host, Mike, and with me is our expert guest, Susan. You can sponsor this podcast for just $25. Your message will be featured across major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and more. If you're interested, visit vpod.ai to get started today.
It's so great to be here.
All right, let's jump right in. I want you, the listener, to close your eyes and just, imagine something with me for a second.
Always a good way to start.
Right. So you are walking down the street, and suddenly you catch that incredible scent of freshly baked bread wafting out of a bakery.
Oh, I definitely know that smell.
Or maybe you're at home, and you hear the sharp, crackling sizzle of bacon hitting a hot pan.
Making me hungry already, honestly.
Exactly. Because before you even consciously process how hungry you are, your stomach just starts to rumble.
Yeah, it's an involuntary reaction, a reflex, really, that we have all experienced at some point.
Exactly. But what we are unpacking today, looking at the science, reveals that this isn't just some, simple empty tank reflex.
Not at all.
That rumble is a literal high-speed conversation happening between your brain and your digestive system. Today, we are exploring a biological frontier that completely changes how we view the human body.
Yeah, the data on this is wild.
We're going to map out the body's second brain,
Mm.
trace the chemical highway connecting your gut directly to your mood, and uncover how the food you eat actually alters the physical structure of your mind.
It is a massive paradigm shift, honestly. We are moving away from the old idea that the brain is just this, isolated commander sitting up in the skull, completely separate from the rest of the body's organs.
Which is what we were all taught, right?
Exactly. But the research shows the brain and the gut are actually engaged in a constant, incredibly complex, bidirectional dialogue.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to understand how a smell in the air triggers a physical rumble in the stomach, we really have to look at the actual hardware making it happen down in our digestive tract.
Right, the actual physical structures.
Yeah. Biologists refer to something called the enteric nervous system, or the ENS, and they literally call it the second brain.
Mm.
But, why does the gut get to be classified as a brain?
Well, mostly because of its sheer complexity and autonomy. The enteric nervous system isn't just, a few scattered nerve endings.
It's much bigger than that.
Oh, way bigger. We are talking about an intricate, vast network of roughly 500 million neurons.
Wow, a lot of neurons.
Yeah, 500 million, embedded directly in the lining of your entire gastrointestinal tract, going from your esophagus all the way down.
500 million neurons just handling lunch? That is crazy.
Precisely. And it needs that processing power, right? Because it is responsible for managing the incredibly complicated, highly coordinated process of digestion.
So it's not just a passive tube that food falls through.
Exactly. It has to dictate peristalsis, which are the muscular contractions that move food along. It has to precisely time the release of specific digestive enzymes, completely depending on what you ate.
So it actually knows the difference between a steak and an apple.
Right. And it constantly adjusts localized blood flow to absorb nutrients. And here's the kicker. It does a massive amount of this entirely on its own.
Wait, really? On its own?
Yeah. If you were to somehow sever the connection between your head and your gut, your enteric nervous system could still successfully digest a meal.
That is unbelievable. But it doesn't normally work in isolation, obviously.
No. Under normal circumstances, it is physically tethered to the central nervous system in your head by the vagus nerve.
Ah, the famous vagus nerve. I like to think of it as this massive biological superhighway winding its way down from your brainstem.
That's great, an analogy.
Right. It goes down through your neck and thorax and branches out into your abdomen to connect with that second brain. Like a high-speed fiber optic cable, not some, old dial-up connection.
Yes, it's the longest cranial nerve in the body. And as you said, it's a superhighway. Traffic flows both ways.
Which makes sense. Traffic flows both ways. But for decades, the medical consensus was essentially top-down. Like, we've all heard of a Nerdist stomach.
Right, where anxiety trickles down and causes bowel problems.
Exactly.
Well, what's fascinating here is that we now know it is a two-way street, and the bottom-up communication is arguably more powerful.
Bottom up, you mean from the gut to the brain?
Yes. Irritation or dysfunction in the gastrointestinal system can actively send distress signals up the vagus nerve to the central nervous system.
Oh, wow.
And that upward signal actively triggers a change in your mood.
Okay, I have a hard time buying this. I want to push back on the premise here for a second.
Sure, go ahead.
If I am sitting at my desk, right, and I'm stressing out because I have a massive mortgage payment due tomorrow and I just don't have the money,
A very real stressor for a lot of people.
Right. That is clearly a brain problem. It's a cognitive realization. Are you really telling me my stomach is causing my financial anxiety?
That is a crucial distinction, so let's break it down. Your gut is not generating the cognitive thought about your mortgage.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty weird.
Right. The source of the thought is your cerebral cortex. However, your gut heavily dictates the amplification of the physiological panic that follows.
The amplification.
Okay, I'm listening. When you have that stressful thought, your brain sends a signal down to the gut. If your gut is healthy, it can handle that signal, process it, and send a calming response back up.
Like saying, we received the alert, but the physical environment down here is stable. Stand down.
Exactly. But what if the gut isn't healthy?
Then what happens?
Then you get a vicious feedback loop. If your gut is inflamed or dysfunctional, that initial stress signal from your brain hits a system that is already sounding its own alarms.
I see.
The gut then fires distress signals back up the vagus nerve to the brain, so your brain is panicking about the mortgage, and now your gut is telling your brain you are right to panic. Everything down here is also on fire.
Wow.
The gut amplifies your cognitive worry into a full-blown, overwhelming physiological anxiety attack. The stomachache isn't just a symptom of your anxiety.
The stomachache is actively feeding the severity of your anxiety.
Precisely.
Wow. Okay, that makes perfect sense. The physiological cascade is being driven from the bottom up. So if these physical distress or calming signals are zooming both ways on this vagus nerve highway, how does a fatty acid in my stomach actually protect my brain? Because the gut isn't just sending electrical impulses, right? It is sending physical compounds.
Yes, and to understand how those compounds are made, we really have to introduce the microscopic factory floor of your digestive system, the gut microbiome.
The factory floor. Okay.
We're talking about a bustling, incredibly diverse ecosystem of trillions of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microorganisms that reside directly in your gastrointestinal tract.
Trillions of them. And they are essentially running a chemical manufacturing plant down there.
They really are. They are taking the food we eat and producing a variety of bioactive compounds, one of the major ones being short-chain fatty acids, specifically one called butyrate.
Butyrate. How does this production actually work?
It comes down to fermentation. When you eat complex carbohydrates, specifically dietary fiber, your human cells actually lack the enzymes to break them down.
So the fiber just passes through us.
Well, it travels intact all the way down to your large intestine, and that is where your microbiome steps in.
The microscopic factory workers.
Exactly. The bacteria consume that fiber, they ferment it, and as a byproduct of that fermentation process, they secrete butyrate.
And this butyrate doesn't just stay in the gut, right? It travels.
Right. It has localized anti-inflammatory properties in the colon, but it also gets absorbed directly into your bloodstream.
Okay.
And its most critical role happens when it reaches the blood-brain barrier.
The blood-brain barrier. We talk about that a lot, but let's visualize it for everyone listening. I like to think of it as a VIP bouncer at a club, or maybe a microscopic cheesecloth wrapped around the brain.
The cheesecloth analogy works really well.
Right, because its entire purpose is to be a selectively permeable filter. It needs to keep potentially harmful substances out.
Things like pathogens and toxins that are just floating around in your bloodstream.
Exactly. But it still has to be porous enough to let essential nutrients, oxygen, and water pass through to the brain tissue.
That is an excellent way to picture it. And the structural integrity of the weave on that cheesecloth is vital.
Because if it tears, you're in trouble.
Right. If the barrier becomes too porous, if it becomes what we call leaky, unwanted molecules enter the brain, and that causes massive cellular damage.
So where does the butyrate manufactured by my gut bacteria fit into this?
It basically acts like a cellular construction foreman.
Okay, explain that.
When the butyrate travels from your gut through your bloodstream and arrives at the blood-brain barrier, it chemically interacts with the cells that make up that barrier.
Endothelial cells, right?
Yes, and it instructs those cells to increase the expression of what biologists call tight junction proteins.
Tight junction proteins. Are those essentially the microscopic glue holding the barrier together?
Think of them like the mortar between the bricks of a wall. The cells of the blood-brain barrier are the bricks.
Okay.
If the mortar is weak or degrading, gaps form and water, or in this case toxins, can seep right through.
Oh, I see.
So butyrate triggers the cells to manufacture more mortar. It strengthens those seals, tightening the weave of your microscopic cheesecloth.
So you're telling me that bacteria in my stomach are literally manufacturing the steel barricades for the VIP bouncer in my head?
That is exactly what the science is showing us. The bacteria fermenting fiber in your large intestine are manufacturing the instructions to build the physical defenses of your brain.
Wait, if my gut bacteria are literally manufacturing the physical defenses of my brain, does it also influence the actual mental processes? Like, if I take a round of broad-spectrum antibiotics for an infection, or if I eat a terrible diet for a month, am I accidentally shutting down an off-site pharmacy that my brain relies on for mood regulation?
You absolutely are. The gut doesn't just build the walls, it directly manufactures or influences the precursors for the neurotransmitters your brain uses to regulate your daily emotions.
Let's look at GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid. I've heard of that.
Yes, GABA is known as a primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, meaning its whole job is to calm the nervous system down.
So it's like the chemical brake pedal.
Exactly. When you are stressed, the neurons in your brain are highly excitable. They are firing rapidly, sending alert signals all over the place.
Right.
But when GABA reaches those neurons, it binds to specific receptors on the outside of the neuronal cell.
Okay, so it attaches to the outside. What happens then? How does it actually calm a hyperactive neuron down from the outside?
It is a stunning electrochemical mechanism, honestly. When GABA binds to that receptor, it triggers a physical channel to open up in the neuron's outer membrane.
Like a little trapdoor.
Yeah, a microscopic trapdoor. And this channel specifically allows chloride ions to rush from the fluid outside the cell to the inside of the cell.
Chloride ions. Okay, let me think back to high school chemistry.
It's all about the charge. Chloride ions carry a negative electrical charge.
Oh, I see. So they're dropping the internal voltage of the cell.
Exactly. A neuron fires based on electrical thresholds.
Right, it has to reach a certain voltage to spark.
Right. So by flooding the inside of the neuron with negatively charged ions, GABA lowers the overall membrane potential.
It pushes the voltage further away from the firing threshold.
Precisely. It makes it physically, electrically much harder for that neuron to fire an impulse.
That is wild.
It really is.
So the physical sensation of taking a deep breath and feeling your anxiety wash away,
Yes.
that is literally negatively charged chloride ions flooding into your neurons, dropping the voltage so your brain stops firing panic signals.
That's the exact biological reality of feeling calm.
And the gut microbiome is heavily involved in regulating and producing the GABA that triggers this whole process.
Right. And GABA isn't the only one. The microbiome is also essential for serotonin.
Serotonin. That's the heavy hitter. It's the neurotransmitter most commonly associated with happiness, satisfaction, and overall well-being. But the brain can't just make it out of thin air, can it?
No, it needs a raw material called tryptophan. We usually hear about tryptophan making you sleepy after eating turkey, but it is actually an essential amino acid.
Okay.
Your gut bacteria play a massive role in metabolizing the tryptophan from your diet so it can be sent up to the brain. If your gut microbiome is unhealthy or depleted, that metabolic process halts.
So your brain is essentially starved of the raw materials it needs to manufacture happiness.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? We have established that a healthy gut produces butyrate to build the brain's walls and provides GABA and tryptophan to keep us calm and happy. But it makes you wonder, if those good bacteria get wiped out, what fills the void?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, supporting these bacterial pharmacies through your gut health is essentially a prerequisite for positive cognitive function and emotional stability, because when they're wiped out, it leads us to a state called dysbiosis.
Dysbiosis. Okay, so just a microbial imbalance.
Simply put, yes, it means the beneficial bacteria have been decimated or, they've been outcompeted.
By what?
By harmful, opportunistic bacteria that have basically overrun the gastrointestinal ecosystem.
And the consequences of this go way beyond just having an upset stomach. Right?
Oh, absolutely. When the gut falls into dysbiosis, it starts sounding the immune alarm.
A physical alarm.
A very loud chemical alarm. Because the intestinal lining is highly innervated, right? And it's packed with immune cells.
Okay.
So a sudden bloom of bad bacteria triggers an immediate immune response. The body basically recognizes that the gut is under siege.
It thinks it's being attacked.
Exactly. And in response, it produces massive amounts of pro-inflammatory cytokines.
Cytokines, those are essentially chemical distress flares, right?
Yes, exactly. They are signaling proteins that tell the immune system to initiate an inflammatory response to fight off an infection.
Which makes sense if you have a cut.
Right. In a localized short-term scenario, like a cut on your arm, inflammation is good. It brings blood and healing factors to the site.
But in the gut.
But in the case of gut dysbiosis, you have a chronic, ongoing release of these inflammatory cytokines. It's a nonstop barrage.
And because of the circulatory system and the vagus nerve, those distress flares don't just stay in your stomach,
No, they travel up,
straight up to the brain.
straight to the brain. And when those cytokines cross into the brain tissue, they activate the brain's own resident immune cells.
The brain has its own immune cells.
It does. They are called microglia.
Microglia, okay.
And when microglia are activated by these distress flares from the gut, they initiate widespread neuroinflammation.
Wow. So if chronic inflammation is a fire, is dysbiosis basically throwing sparks across that vagus nerve into the brain?
That is a terrifyingly accurate way to picture it. You are dealing with a double whammy. First, you lack the butyrate, so your blood-brain barrier.
Microscopic cheesecloth.
Right, it's weak and leaky. Second, your gut is constantly firing those inflammatory distress flares into your bloodstream.
So you have a compromised shield and a barrage of sparks flying directly into your brain tissue.
That is the exact mechanism of neuroinflammation.
Hmm.
And we cannot overstate the clinical reality of what this means for you. Chronic neuroinflammation is not just a precursor to a bad mood.
It's much more severe than that.
It is now recognized by neurologists as a highly significant underlying driver in devastating conditions.
We're talking about major psychiatric and neurological conditions, right?
Yeah.
Like depression, Alzheimer's disease, and multiple sclerosis.
Yes. When those microglia remain chronically activated over years or even decades, the persistent inflammation actually begins to damage healthy brain tissue and neurons.
It literally destroys the brain over time.
It accelerates cognitive decline. Science is now strongly linking the progression of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, not just to what is happening in the skull, but to the chronic inflammatory state that originated down in the digestive tract.
That fundamentally shifts how you have to think about dinner. It's not just about calories or gaining weight. It is about managing the inflammation in your brain. Which brings us to the most empowering part of this whole discussion. With such high stakes for both our mental and physical health, how do we fix a dysbiotic gut and feed the good guys?
It starts with the most direct lever you can pull, which is dietary intervention. We touched on it earlier, but fiber is absolutely critical.
Right, because fiber is the fuel for fermentation.
Exactly. The beneficial bacteria that produce neuroprotective short-chain fatty acids, like butyrate, they strictly feed on indigestible plant fibers.
So if your diet is highly processed and low in fiber,
You are literally starving the microscopic army that protects your brain. You have to give them the raw materials they need to ferment.
but what if you've taken antibiotics or you've had a terrible diet for years and you don't even have a robust population of good bacteria left to feed? You can't just feed an empty factory.
That is where fermented foods come in. Things like high-quality yogurt, kefir, kimchi, and sauerkraut.
Here's where it gets really interesting because of how fermentation works outside the body.
Yes. When you ferment cabbage to make sauerkraut, you are creating an environment where beneficial bacteria multiply exponentially.
So it's packed with them.
Very packed. When you eat that sauerkraut, you aren't just eating fiber, you are ingesting billions of live, active, beneficial microbes. You are directly seeding your gastrointestinal tract with new workers for the factory.
Based on everything we've just discussed about GABA, dropping the voltage in neurons and stopping neuroinflammation, actively choosing to eat a bowl of kimchi is essentially a preventative mental health intervention.
This raises an important question for everyone listening to consider. How are your daily lifestyle choices feeding or starving your neurological health?
It's a huge question.
It is. We are rapidly entering an era of medicine where treating a mood disorder might start in the kitchen or with a targeted probiotic rather than a traditional pharmaceutical.
And the medical community is already mapping that future. We are moving toward personalized microbiome medicine, right?
Yes, the idea is that in the near future, a doctor might sequence your individual gut microbiome, identify exactly which bacterial strains you are missing.
And prescribe a custom-tailored cocktail of probiotics to treat your specific anxiety, depression, or brain fog.
That is the clinical frontier. But there is also a very crucial preventative note in the research here, particularly concerning adolescence and early development.
The teenage years are a highly sensitive window, right?
Extremely sensitive, both for the physical wiring of the central nervous system and the development of the microbiome. We know the gut and the brain communicate bidirectionally.
Yeah, researchers are uncovering a really alarming connection here. They are finding that psychological issues like abnormal body image and eating disorders during the teenage years can significantly raise the risk of developing IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and other gastrointestinal problems in adulthood.
It's a tragic but fascinating mechanism.
How exactly does a psychological stressor physically break the gut years later?
It comes back to the physical stress response and how it alters the gut environment. When a teenager is experiencing severe psychological stress,
Like chronic anxiety over body image.
right, their brain constantly releases cortisol, which is the primary stress hormone.
And what does cortisol physically do to the digestive tract?
Well, in a state of chronic stress, the body prioritizes immediate survival.
Fight or flight.
Exactly. Cortisol literally shunts blood flow away from the gastrointestinal tract and pushes it toward the muscles and the heart.
Because you don't need to digest lunch if you are running from a tiger.
Precisely. But when that stress is chronic due to psychological pressure, the gut is constantly deprived of optimal blood flow.
So the gut is basically suffocating a little bit.
In a way, yes. This slows down peristalsis, the physical movement of the gut. It alters the pH of the stomach acid.
Oh, wow.
It creates a hostile, stagnant environment. The beneficial bacteria die off, and the opportunistic, harmful bacteria thrive in that altered pH.
So the psychological stress physically changes the actual climate of the gut.
Yes. And if a teenager is also engaging in restrictive eating disorders, they are simultaneously starving whatever good bacteria are left.
Because there's no fiber coming in.
Exactly. And because this is happening during a critical developmental window, they are fundamentally miswiring the gut-brain axis.
The communication lines get permanently crossed.
The central nervous system and the enteric nervous system learn to communicate in a state of constant alarm. This sets a baseline of chronic inflammation and dysbiosis that becomes embedded.
And that manifests as severe physical irritable bowel syndrome well into adulthood. It really underlines how holistically interconnected the human body is.
You absolutely cannot separate the mind's cognitive stress from the stomach's physical function.
They are one continuous, unbroken loop.
Exactly. The mind and the body are not two separate entities. They're an integrated ecosystem.
So, to bring this all back to your everyday life, the next time you have a gut-wrenching experience or you feel butterflies in your stomach right before you step on stage for a big presentation, remember that these are not just cute, poetic metaphors.
They are literal biological reflections of the complex, lightning-fast chemical and electrical interactions happening between your two brains.
Your gut is physically feeling the brain's panic, and your brain is heavily reliant on your gut's chemical response to calm it down.
That connection dictates your digestion, your daily emotional stability, your protection against degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, and the entire future trajectory of psychiatric medicine. And it is all moderated by that microscopic trillion-member ecosystem working inside you.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound, almost philosophical thought to chew on as we wrap up. If our daily moods, our stress levels, our physical ability to calm down with chloride ions, and our long-term neurological health are so heavily dictated by trillions of non-human organisms of the bacteria and fungi living inside our colon, how much of ourself, how much of our feelings, our reactions, and our very personality is actually us?
It's a wild thought.
And how much is just our microbiome, sitting behind the curtain, pulling the chemical levers? Something to think about the next time your stomach rumbles. Thank you so much for joining us today and exploring this incredible biological frontier with us. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will catch you next time.